they were wrong, weren't they? That's what they expected back then in Jesus' time. And they were following him, expecting him to do this. But he says in John 18, my kingdom is not of this world. So the expectations of the crowds that followed him was not a reality. So Jesus turns to these enthusiastic followers and he lays down 3 conditions that have to be met for you to be a disciple. Let's slide 4 up, please, Sheila. And we should see those. You must hate your loved ones. Give up your own life, and you must give up all of your possessions. Oh, that's a bit tough, isn't it? Ooh. Do you want me to read it again? I'm reading scripture here. So slide 5 up. We're going to step through this text reasonably quickly today. So first of all, we had the crowds, didn't we? They're wanting to follow Jesus, and when we see crowds followers expecting a new kingdom to be set up in the natural realm, in Jerusalem, and he turns and lays out these requirements. Are you sure you lot still want to follow me? In Matthew 8:20 and Luke 9:58, we read these words: foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. In other words, I may have nowhere to sleep tonight. Are you sure you still want to follow me? So Jesus is stating what it truly means to be a disciple. So, hating your loved ones. We'll look at the first one. Well, that seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it? So, hopefully I can dispel the contradiction that it might seem is there. So if we read 1 John 4:20, it says, whoever claims to love God yet hates his brother and sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. That seems to be contradictory, doesn't it? Exodus 20, honor your father and your mother. Part of the 10 Commandments. So what did Jesus really mean? Now, I don't think he meant that you are to literally hate your loved ones. If you look at the word hate in Greek, it's the word misio, and it means to love something less than. To love something less than. So if there's ever a conflict with following Jesus and following your loved ones, Jesus is saying you need to love them less than you love me. Our love for Jesus should be so great that others really do seem loved less. You know, that might produce difficulties in our families. If we decide to follow Jesus, if we're all in, if we're going to follow him with all of our hearts, then it might cause division and difficulty in some family situations, because they won't get or understand what it means to really be a disciple of Jesus. They won't get our level of vibrancy and authenticity, our following of our King above all else, even above them. Peter and the apostles, when they were being questioned in the court, they said, we must obey God rather than human beings. We must obey God first. Acts 5:29. Jesus is such a great treasure that everyone and everything should become far less than the worth that we place upon him in what we see, and also in our actions and how we live that out. The gap should be so big between our love for him above anything else that the difference is so much it seems like, well, this is love and this is hate. That's how much more we're supposed to love him. You can put a scale and say, well, if this is a level where I hate someone, this is where I like them, this is where I really like them, and this is where I love them. And we do that, don't we, with people? The reality is that gulf between the love and the hate, that's the difference above. Even those that we love, how much higher that we're supposed to love Jesus. We're to give up our own life. And last week we looked at Matthew chapter 16. And so I'm just going to summarize very briefly here what we see from Luke. Jesus is essentially saying, well, I may be heading up the hill to a place called Golgotha, taking a cross with me. Are you sure you want to follow me? If you're not willing to pick up your cross and to follow him, if it's not 100%, if it's not all in, then don't bother. A man or woman that's walking to their execution has no further plans of their own. They've forfeited control of their life and destiny. I'm going to read that again. Okay, are you listening? Front row, are you listening? Are you listening? A man or a woman walking to their execution has no further plans of their own. They have forfeited control of their life and their destiny. Jesus paints a really vivid picture. It was going to become his reality, wasn't it? We know that. That was going to become reality for Jesus. He didn't mean that if you don't die on a cross, you're not a disciple. He didn't mean that. But what we must do is lovingly surrender control of our lives and ourself to the one who truly loves us. Isn't that what real relationship is about? We've all gone very quiet. Yeah. Now that's a great love, isn't it? And we should love like that, our loved ones, but we've got to love even more. So much more. Jesus is so much more worth our worship, our adoration, and all those things. So we have to surrender control of our lives. That's what real relationship and love is about. Paul puts it this way, Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So there's two parables that then follow these statements. So we have these first two statements about you can't be a disciple unless you love others more than Jesus, unless you take up your cross and follow him. And then come two parables. One is about a builder who's trying to build a tower. But something that's half built that doesn't get finished can be a mockery. What do you think Jesus means by that? We have to know and understand the cost of following Jesus so that we can recognize that when we have these touch points, these difficult times, we won't just give up. We know life's not going to be easy following Jesus. But so when it gets tough, we don't give up. We press in to know him more, to trust him more. Jesus didn't promise us a mansion on this earth, did he? In heaven, yes, but on this earth, no. If you end up with a mansion, then maybe you're doubly blessed. But not. Jesus doesn't promise us wealth and mansions in this earthly realm. Instead, he says you might have nowhere to sleep tonight if you follow me. We have to figure out the cost of discipleship before we claim to be Christians. Just a thought, do we make it too easy today to become a follower of Jesus?